What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Tequila Tuesday. I believe we are the 46th episode now. And want to give a shout out to Sendoso, Scotty's Little Sales Club's official sending partner. I got some cool stuff that I'm working on with Sendoso, including somebody's going to win a free trip in November to Surf and Sales, courtesy of Sendoso. So stay tuned. I'll have some details on that coming up. Super excited to be here today with a guy that I am just meeting also really for the first time, but I've heard lots of good stuff about. It's Brandon Fluharty. Brandon is recently retired from the corporate world, as he just let me know. He's trying to follow in my footsteps. He's a founder of Be Focused, Live Great, and he's the author of 7 Steps to 7 Figures. I'll drop a few links in here so you all can check out his profile on LinkedIn and some of the stuff that he's working on. So he's going to talk to us about these 7 steps. 7 steps to being a 7-figure seller, a 7-figure earner. And if you saw my post today, this man is famous in my book for posting his W-2 online very bravely and boldly, which I appreciate because I have long kind of lobbied for this earnings call amongst sales trainers and coaches and whatnot, to kind of bring everybody out of the shadows and be, total transparency with everything. So Brandon, I'm going to kind of get out of the way. If you're brand new, drop your questions in chat. You can do it publicly or privately to me. I'll get a queue going and we'll pull you off mute and allow you to interact with Brandon, but he's going to walk us through some of the stuff and the topic tonight. Brandon, you're in charge.
Yeah,
man.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott, and nice to meet everyone. So some familiar faces for me as well, and some not so familiar faces. So if you don't know what I'm all about, Scott alluded to a little bit of it, which is I try to be as transparent as possible. Growing up in sales and being in sales for nearly 20 years, there is a lot of snake oil out there. And I always questioned these gurus and authority figures who talked about selling, yet they were 20, 30 years removed from actually picking up a bag and sitting across from somebody and actively selling. So yeah, mama always said, never share how much you make, but I've broken that cardinal sin and flashed my W-2 a few times on LinkedIn because I look at that as our only common denominator in sales to really prove that you do what you talk about. So that's a little bit about me and the foundation. And I want to keep this super casual. So I do have a few things that I will walk us through and guide us through as it relates to the 7 steps to 7 figures. And, but, certainly want to leave plenty of time for Q&A. I want to, again, make this conversational and make sure that I'm addressing your questions. So hopefully I'll spur a few concepts. I'll let you know when it's worth writing anything down if you want to take notes. If not, hopefully it inspires you to ask a few questions as we go along. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll dive right in. All right. So before we get started, just again, a little bit about how I was operating in sales and a little bit about me. So I, like many of you, I happened into sales 20 plus years ago, almost a little over 15 years, almost 20 years. I was trying to be actually a professional soccer player, and that didn't quite work out for me. So if I wasn't going to play, the next best thing was to train and coach youth players. And that's exactly what I did. And I gained a grounding in selling at that first soccer education startup. We were training young players all over Long Island. I was employee number 4, and I was in charge of selling small group and one-on-one training packages. I knew a little bit about the game and had a lot of passion for helping players get better and improve. And so I was selling without even knowing I was selling. So the first golden rule I got out of that was the best way to sell is to stop selling. But I got into sales and a dedicated management role in New York City. From there, actually ran into some financial issues. I had to sort of do a life reset here in Florida, where I live. I live in a small town in Florida called Sarasota. Split my time between Florida and Chicago, and live in the snowbird life now. But life wasn't so easy before. When I was starting here in Sarasota, Florida, I was peddling $45 print ads to local bars and restaurants for a little local paper, and almost got fired from that job. Luckily, I moved on before that happened. So I then climbed the ranks. I went into television advertising. Then I parlayed that into, after seeing the writing on the wall of how newspapers and television advertising was tanking, I wanted to get into the digital marketing space. So around 2012, I first got into SaaS. I was still selling into small and medium-sized businesses, but it was for a large national digital marketing company. And that was my first foray into SaaS. And from there, I climbed from SMB into eventually mid-market, and then enterprise. And then most recently, over the past 4 years, I was with a enterprise conversational AI company, really pitching into strategic accounts, Fortune 100 level accounts. And before joining that company, probably very similar to many of you on this call, I had to constantly hustle and grind to get to the top of the leaderboard. I was successful, but there were a lot of sacrifices. My mental health, my emotional well-being, my relationships, traveling all the time. So my diet wasn't great, skipping time zones. I wasn't getting proper rest and sleep. And I just had to constantly do that month over month, quarter after quarter, year after year, until eventually it was just too much. In fact, I landed in the hospital in my 30s. I had an idiopathic stroke with no known cause. So not a drug taker, no pre-existing health conditions. The only thing we could point to was just how hard I was working around the clock and grinding myself into the ground. So at one point, I was capped at like 200K. I just couldn't break through that ceiling. And it really wasn't until I sort of embraced this idea of having a personal operating system, something I could really consistently gravitate and ground myself towards, where I just focused not so much on the outcomes, but I focused on the process. And I fell in love with that process, and I focused on the inputs of that personal system. And I'll deconstruct that across these 7 steps, and I'll share some resources of where you can grab that for yourself. But the new way, really, when I was in strategic sales over the past 4+ years, I was with a company called LivePerson, public company, not the most well-known in technology, but they are a leader in the conversational AI space. I went from a late-stage startup selling into enterprises, and then joined them in January of 2018 to sell into strategic accounts. And these strategic accounts were all Fortune 100 level companies. Was able to execute on this personal operating system. I was able to close over 50 million in total contract value, which equated to just over 27 million in annual recurring revenue, and had a nice commission plan. It was a great company. So I was able to pull down just over 3.6 million in annual income across those 4 years. And then what that equates to, again, sharing a little bit of that transparency. I get some flack for this and I get some praise for this, but I'm going to keep doing it anyways. So this is my W-2 from 2021, just to show that I have earned 7 figures. But this is just a snapshot of year 3 doing this 3 years in a row. My average over the past 3 years was about 1.17 million. So let's jump into it. What are the 7 steps to not only selling 7-figure deals, as Scott alluded to, but also earning 7 figures? Obviously, step number 1, I made a monumental leap to go from a late stage startup to an enterprise grade, enterprise first SaaS company, something that's been around for 20 plus years. It was public, had proper infrastructure. So getting myself in the right environment was absolute key. So I wanted to find a few things. I wasn't necessarily looking, just a little backstory here. I wasn't necessarily looking to leave where I was. I was pretty happy, again, making comfortable 6 figures. It was a fun company to work for. I had a lot of autonomy. I was on a very small enterprise team, but our solution really was geared more towards mid-market and small businesses. I just happened to be selling the future to these large restaurant chains and retail chains. But they approached me, LivePerson. I was recruited, and when I was looking to make that decision to leave, I had a short list of criteria that were really important for me. Is the industry, artificial intelligence, is that going to change our lives and impact our personal lives for decades to come? And I had a few other personal things that I sort of checked off. And as I interviewed, as I met with more and more people, and especially more and more of the leaders at LivePerson, I was really compelled to make that change. And really the first week when I was onboarded, I was told by the hiring manager, Mike, he said, this is a 7-figure earning role. People can make $1 million selling our software if you do it in a really intelligent way. If you work hard, but you also work really intelligently, you can make $1 million here. So that was really step 1, getting in the right environment. So just to break some things up here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen before I move to the next screen and the next step. And I just kind of want to open it up. I want to kind of keep this conversational, maybe interact with a little bit with some of the people here. I know I had some folks who were coming on who've already downloaded this ebook, 7 Steps to 7 Figures. Anybody here already download this or heard about it? Awesome. Larry, Brian.
4 or 5,
Lori.
at least one purchase just now.
Awesome. Cool. Anybody, Larry, Brian, Lori, you want to talk a little bit about maybe what you read in the first step, getting yourself in the right environment? Anything stand out to you? Anything you have questions about or want to talk through? Might be helpful for the group to hear from not just me, but from some others going through this sort of process. Larry, I saw you raised your hand first. I'll call on you. You might have to put yourself off of mute. As you were reading through it.
Go ahead, Larry.
No, I've been reading it. I haven't got through it all the way yet. I find it very enlightening and how you put a process together. I love processes. Like that's what I've based my whole career on. So trying to adapt it to what I do is audio video solutions is something I'm challenged with, but I definitely love the read.
Awesome. Appreciate you sharing that feedback. For those of you who will eventually get a hold of the copy, the big thing that I do in step 1 is sort of work backwards, and I just solve a math problem. So to understand if this is a 7-figure selling environment and a 7-figure earning environment, I provide a spreadsheet, and it's literally plugging in your data, plugging in the company's data, and kind of working backwards of, hey, if I want to earn $1 million, my base salary is this. How do I fill in the gap with the commission plan? How do I fill in the gap with my closing ratio? How do I fill in the gap with my my deals and my average deal average? And then just work backwards from there. And then that gives you a very objective view. You know, a number is a number. And that gives you your roadmap for, hey, here's how I can work towards becoming a 7-figure earner in this environment. And then layer that on with, okay, am I in the right environment to actually get deals done with large companies? Are other sellers selling 7-figure or even 8-figure deals at this company? What are the deal cycles? Those are sort of the psychological things and the questions you want to ask yourself. Hey, is this the right environment for me to be a 7-figure seller and a 7-figure earner? Before we go on to step 2, any thoughts, questions? Scott, yeah.
Yeah, we got a question here already. We'll just take one question right now. It's from Emran. Emran, can you take yourself off mute?
Sure.
Go for it, buddy.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, Brandon. I've been following you. I think we've been in touch, right?
Yeah. Good to see you.
I had a quick question for you. You know, you went from selling to, I think you mentioned restaurants and to large enterprise deals, right? And that's quite a switch. What helped you, right? A lot of time I talk, I sell to IT services companies and large enterprises, and a lot of times they go, it's the network you have, or it's so how did you make the transition? How much did your network help, or was it more strategic on your end, and how did you go about it?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, Imran. I leveraged my network literally 2 weeks before joining LivePerson. In my old role, even though I was with restaurants, selling into restaurant chains and retail chains, they were pretty high level chains. We're talking like Estee Lauder, we're talking In-N-Out Burger. So some recognizable brands. So it wasn't like I was completely coming into big companies cold. And my old company, the startup, they were selling iPad point of sale solutions. And so I was able to work pretty closely in my old role with Apple. And we even got companies like Steak and Shake to come into Cupertino, and Apple would deliver sort of their spiel of, hey, here's why it's exciting to work with the iPad. So I had some high touch points and a little bit of that experience. But what I did do is I didn't wait around to get onboarded by LivePerson for the first 90 days. I got started right away, knowing that I had a network at Apple that I could leverage, who had really key contacts into some strategic accounts. And I also found out that LivePerson was also a partner of Apple's. So I highlight in one of the steps in the ebook. This is how I won a major deal with Aramark. Aramark is like the food services provider to pretty much every stadium, every like corporate office, every school, every jail. Most people don't know the company. They might know them for their uniforms, but they don't know that they provide these food services for really large sporting arenas and schools and so forth. So literally my first day on the job was at the NRF show, so National Retail Federation show in New York in January. I had reached out to my contacts at Apple. They set up a meeting on my first day at NRF where I met Peter at Aramark, and he said, hey, he has this vision to get rid of hawkers. Hawkers are the guys and gals that walk up and down the stairs, beer here, get your peanuts, all that stuff. He wanted to bring an experience like Uber, where you could just pull out your phone and from your phone have a conversational experience, a messaging experience, just message what you want. And like magic, your beer and your food shows up to your seat. And ironically, 6 months later, we did just that. I would have never done that. I could have never gotten that off the ground. I would have never had that connection with Peter if I didn't leverage my existing network and I didn't have sort of the foresight to reach out to them and have that continuity between the two organizations. So that was a really fun deal to work on, as you can imagine. We launched with the Philadelphia Phillies, and we drank a lot of beer when we launched that night. I can tell you that. So cool. Thanks for that. Let me get back into it, and we'll keep going here. And let me see. Make sure I'm sharing the right screen.
Hey, Brandon, you had mentioned, anybody who's read the book so far. So I thought I'd jump in real quick while you're searching for your next thing. But one of the things that stood out in that first part for me was understanding your hourly rate, and then where the gap is. And for me, that was important, even though I'm not in a position where I'm selling these big enterprise deals quite yet. But it's still important to me to understand that, because I'm constantly thinking about whether what I'm doing is worth the time, and if it's getting me to that goal of whatever goal that I'm trying to reach. And that calculation, that you went through was super important for me.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Ryan. And that's a good reminder. It's a super important thing that I actually paste my hourly rate on my computer. Other people I've heard, they keep it on the refrigerator. They know that number intimately well. And what Brian's referring to is, I have everybody go through an exercise, a very simple one. You can go in your HR system if you're using UltiPro, ADP, doesn't matter. Just understand, hey, here's my gross earnings from last year. And then here's what the company said I worked as far as number of hours. Divide that number, divide your earnings by the number of hours you worked last year, and you come up with an hourly rate. And it's really important to know that rate, because there are going to be things competing for your time, your energy, and your attention. And you need to think like a CEO. You need to think, is this this account, is this demo, is this whatever it is this worth my time? It'll even help you to make personal decisions. Should I outsource cutting the lawn, or should I do it myself? Yeah, go outsource that, because that's going to take away from your hourly rate. You can make very strategic decisions when you know what an hour of your time is worth. Cool. So thanks, Brian, for bringing that up. All right. So step two actually leads, it's a good segue, kind of knowing your hourly rate, knowing you're in the right environment. Once you're in that right environment, step two is all about getting really strategic with your account list. And in the ebook, I go through a similar exercise. Some of you may have heard of the Japanese concept of Ikigai. Ikigai is a Venn diagram that has four basically criteria that loosely translates to reason for being. Doing something you love, doing something you know something about, doing something that the world needs, and so forth. And so I wanted to take that concept because coming out of my first year at LivePerson, I was saying yes to everything. And I think my manager, kudos to Sean, who I was directly working for after Mike hired me. Sean did something really important early in 2019, and 2019 was the first year that I made seven figures. He pulled me to the side. We were in Chicago. We were about to meet with United Airlines. We were grabbing a dinner the night before, and he said, "Brandon, you're really good when you take your time and you really work and nurture an account, but you kind of suck when you don't feel aligned with that company, or you're sort of rushing. You don't sort of have some sort of personal affiliation with them." And he said, I think the best thing that you can do this year is slow down in order to speed up. And he was absolutely right. I was like, that's my theme. That is my theme for the year. I'm not going to have New Year's resolutions. I'm not going to have goals. I'm going to have a theme, slow down in order to speed up. And then I'm going to point my system, my personal system, and all of the personal operating principles are going to be supporting slow down in order to speed up. And what that allowed me to do was go through this exercise similar to Ikigai. I created a Venn diagram with 5 different criteria that were important to me. I wanted things like the opportunity to move fast. I had knowledge in that industry. It could be a company first for Live Person, because I really enjoyed closing deals that were a first, either an industry first or a big account, for the company, and so forth. And so, what happened when I had these 5 spheres of criteria in front of me? In the middle, there was a diamond. And so I came up with this concept of finding my diamond accounts. And I plotted my account list over that Venn diagram. And I said, okay, anything that comes close to that diamond or inside that diamond, those are my diamond accounts. And that's what I'm going to strategically focus on and work with our SDR, BDRs to target those accounts in a really, really strategic way, a really intelligent way. And one of the things that I told the BDRs is, not that Tesla was one of my accounts, but I said, because Elon Musk is so popular and so familiar as a public CEO, I said, what do we need to do? What would we need to say in our outreach to get Elon Musk to not only say yes to a meeting, but he compliment us on how we approached him? And so we use that as our diamond standard to go after these diamond accounts. And I can tell you what happened was I ended up making $1.5 million that year, following this really strategic approach and operating under this theme of slowing down in order to speed up. I didn't need a bunch of accounts. I went for high quality accounts that meant something to me, so that I could be excited to really show up, work hard every day, and deliver something valuable to these accounts. And I got rid of some pretty massive accounts off of my list. We're talking Walmart, literally the world's largest company, Apple. Even though I had people on the inside there that I was connected with. Why didn't those accounts fit on the list? Well, one, I knew they couldn't move fast. I knew I was not going to be sitting down anytime soon with Tim Cook. I knew I wasn't going to be sitting down with the C-suite at Walmart. They had a fortress set up, and it was just going to be way too time consuming to be on a plane, getting to Bentonville, Arkansas to meet with directors at Walmart to only say, hey, it's going to take you 14 weeks just to sell a $100,000 pilot. No thanks. I moved it off my list, and I focused on higher quality accounts where I could get into VP, SVP, even the C-suite on some of these diamond accounts. Ended up closing Delta Airlines. I was on their planes every week practically, and came up with a unique strategy where I wrote their executives an open letter. It was opened by their CEO, Ed Bastian, because I was tracking it. I could see it, he was opening it on his iPad on the weekend. Chipotle, a fun one. Got to eat a lot of burritos. I was already doing that anyways. I was already their customer. I could move really fast. And a few other companies, Delta's rival, United Airlines. I took the playbook, the blueprint that I created for Delta, and forced myself to be their customer. Spent a lot of time in Chicago, flying to Chicago. Fell in love with it that I bought a second place there. So I became their customer, and I sort of became linked to them because I went through this exercise.
Hey, Brandon, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm curious about is, what was the split of your base and variable, in some of these roles, or all of the roles, if you will,
Yeah.
7 figures for the first time and that kind of thing?
Yep. it's a good question. So in the enterprise role at the late stage startup, I had a base of about 75K and a decent, typical SaaS type of comp structure. They would pay out on, obviously they were trying to push monthly recurring revenue. So I'd get paid a full month, the first month of whatever deal I got, and little accelerators and bonuses on top of that based off of if it was a multi-year contract. When I got myself up to live person, really working after strategic accounts, the base actually was 185K. So I started there and then eventually got myself to 200K. So I have found with the right companies, sort of usually public, they've got to be a public company. We're not really talking startups here. And established, right? A well-known name. If you can name that account, you would know it. Or name the company, you would know that company. And 100 to 200K is standard as far as base. So I had like that chunk. Now I had to solve a gap for like 800K, a little over 800K to make the $1 million mark. And again, that's the exercise. That's the calculator that I provide. And then there was a small layer of stock options and restricted stock units that I eventually won over time. That really helped in the latter years after I proved myself and I got success getting the RSU grants, which RSUs really are treated like comp. When they vest, you should go ahead and, obviously talk to a CPA, but the usual wisdom is you sell when those RSUs grant. Maybe a little different for stock options or, stuff that is more forward thinking, but really it's base, RSUs, and then your commissions. And 5 to 7% is average. And then accelerator territory, once you meet your quota, you're usually double that. And I advocate that you should be looking for a company that provides simplicity when it comes to a comp structure. I really appreciated that at LivePerson, they kept things simple. I've heard some nightmare stories of people I mentor and advise. They purposely keep their comp structure, their commission plans extremely convoluted and complicated. And we need to get past that bullshit. That's a red flag for me. I'd say if the comp structure is too complicated to understand, probably a good idea to keep looking elsewhere.
That's super helpful, man. And I ran a quick informal poll and said, how many of you think that you can earn, $1 million in your current role? And it was like crickets.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Had another question from Eric. Take yourself off mute, Eric.
Hey, just really quickly, my ears perked up when you mentioned the diamond accounts and how targeted your criteria was. And I was wondering if you or anyone in your crew ever went ahead and put that into the CRM and then used something like Einstein Analytics to just kick off like a stream of that kind of clientele for yourself.
No, we did not. I love that systems thinking, Eric, and I'm actually being asked to come back as a contractor. And those would be the types of things that I would be looking to implement with more teams and corporations. We'd be looking at those kinds of things where you can standardize approach, but not get rid of the personalization, because we'll talk a little bit about this, like getting into personality traits, but there are going to be some sellers who are introverts, some sellers who are extroverts, and you need to align your accounts to the best served person. I sort of had the foresight to get rid of Walmart and Apple. One, I also didn't have like amazing experience working with either of those, more on the retail side. So I knew that there were experts who were coming from a background where all they focused on was retail. So they would be better suited. So I think it's a smart strategy, Eric. We should be doing those kinds of things. And are you a leader by chance? Because that's the type of thinking we need from leadership.
Young Turk fractional CRO, clawing my way into the space with help from people like yourself and Scott and this crew.
Awesome. Cool.
Could I jump in with a question?
Oh,
Yeah.
Go ahead, John. Go for it.
Brandon, so on those big deals that you're working with and the big companies that you're talking about, they obviously have, technical chops and things like that. How did you approach the build versus buy type stuff when you were trying to work those major accounts?
Yeah, that was what I tried to get to as quickly as possible. We sort of talked about not only build versus buy, but also like buy small or go bust. And I tried to go for that. If they're going to buy, like buy the bust, buy like a big transformation, even though they might have to start smaller. So that would be something that I would kind of work in really quickly into my discovery phase, like places like Target, I got the runaround. Places like Best Buy, I got the runaround because I learned very quickly they're cultures who like to build stuff in-house. They had whole innovation centers. They would hire people in Seattle and San Francisco to just run their innovation labs. And I knew it was going to be difficult. So I changed my strategy slightly to actually appeal to those folks. But generally what I found is that was still a time suck. And I was better off going to like a sweet spot of my diamond accounts where I kind of knew a little bit over time after about 18, 24 months of doing this. I was like, I could almost even identify the type of companies that would want to buy versus build and buy the bust, buy a big transformation. And that's really kind of what I banked on, literally on sort of year 2 and year 3, keeping me in the 7-figure earners club. But great question, John.
Thanks. I appreciate that answer.
All right, Brandon, real quick before you move to step 3, KD says hello.
Oh, hey, what's up, KD?
He's gonna come make an appearance. Go ahead, transition towards.
Nice. There we go. All right, so let's get into step 3. If I can pull it up. All right, there we go. All right, step 3. So when you get into your diamond accounts, this was certainly the case for me. I started to really suffer from imposter syndrome. So I was always a big dreamer. I always thought big. That's how I won accounts, selling into enterprises and mid-market, even small business. But it's a whole different standard. And I'll talk about 2 things. I'll talk about what I was pleasantly surprised about sitting across from like a Steve Nelson, who is the former CEO of United Healthcare. Him talking about, hey, how can we transform healthcare and make it a consumer experience that's similar to how you personalize your Spotify playlist? That kind of talking and thinking was like really exciting for me, but I couldn't have like gotten in the room if I wouldn't have had some confidence with their SVPs, if I couldn't have had the confidence to speak with my CEO and sort of be the quarterback and then have the CEO and our CFO and other experts inside the organization who have a lot more expertise than I do. If I didn't have that confidence, there would be no way that once I got into the room and I'm sitting across from Steve and a room of like 15 other people, to have those exciting conversations. So I struggled. My confidence, even though I was closing deals, I was coming off of closing Aramark, closing Delta, soon to close United Airlines. We just closed Chipotle. I was suffering from a lack of confidence. And so I did go out on my own. I sought out a coach who, Amber Diver, she focused us exclusively on imposter syndrome and helping you work through a methodology. It's called CTFAR. Basically, in short, it's every circumstance is a fact. A circumstance is something that everybody can not deny. So one example that we did in sales is, in sales, I have to communicate with people, right? That's a fact that nobody could deny. But those circumstances will lead to thoughts. And that's where things get a little tricky. So the thoughts might be a negative thought. And I might think to myself, well, I'm an introvert and it's really hard for me to communicate with people confidently. Or I go into meetings and I ramble on. I can't start meetings well. And that thought then leads to a feeling. And a feeling might be, when I'm not confident, is I'm shrinking. I don't feel expansive. I don't feel like I can really soak up the energy of the room. And then that feeling of shrinking leads me to acting on what I thought would happen, which would be I do stumble and when presenting or going into a meeting. And when I stumble in those meetings, well, then I lose the deal. So that would be like the negative, unintentional model, the thought model, that then those actions and those output of that would reinforce my thoughts. And so it becomes, as you can see, this vicious cycle. So we went through a program to make all those unintentional models for all the circumstances I face. We turn those into intentional models. So I really started to be more reflective. I took the time, I did the deep work to really battle through this, because I knew if I had a really confident mindset that is consistent, I knew that I could have a really high winning percentage. And my winning percentage, my closing rate, was close to 78% when I stepped away, when I retired. I went in with the mindset of, why couldn't I win this deal? Like, we should win this. And so what this work helped me to ultimately do was, I started to view my personal limitations. I started to repurpose them into my superpower. And again, that introversion was a perfect example. Me being an introvert and socially anxious, I was socially anxious that early in my career, I actually had a panic. I had an anxiety attack in front of a customer of ours. I got through it. I didn't know what, I was like young 20 something. I didn't know what happened, that it was even a panic attack. It wasn't until I realized what panic attack and anxiety attacks were that I could label it today. But it really stifled me, that I really cringed when it came to public speaking, when it came to talking with people in person. And it was something I really had to work on. And so it really wasn't until I got into like enterprise sales and strategic selling that I learned my introversion was a strategic asset to actually help me, because I was slowing down. I was being more methodical, because I could go higher quality and deeper on a smaller subset of accounts, versus being this extroverted person who gets box seats to the Lakers game and you solely sell your solution on relationships. I was never going to be that person. I was never going to be the person closing deals over steak dinners and wine. I was going to do it by delivering really good business value, because I was doing research and bringing them insights, and being in a room where I could be a quiet and be a good listener and empathetic, and then turn those into a strategic plan that we could march forward on. So that was super, super important to go through that, because if I hadn't gone through that, a lot of those things that were just creeping at the back of my mind, oh, you're not good enough, or you shouldn't be, getting this success, or you've been lucky so far, it's only a matter of time before the shoe drops. That would have kept me in that negative cycle, and I never would have broken through that imposter syndrome.
Brandon, real quick, what was the name of the woman. It was Amber what?
Amber Dibert. So she is somebody that I recommend actually in the ebook. So anybody who's getting a hold of it, you can get her, but it's just Amber, Deibert. She's awesome because she came from a sales enablement background, working with San Francisco, Silicon Valley based companies. And instead of a V, it's a B, Scott. B as in boy. Yeah, look her up on LinkedIn. She is awesome. Can't recommend her enough if imposter syndrome is something that you're thinking you suffer from, or you definitely know you suffer from. That's it. Awesome. Any thoughts, questions before we move on to step 4? All right, awesome. Let's keep going. All right, so step 4 is once I got over imposter syndrome, I was really spending a lot more time inside the 4 walls of these diamond accounts. I could feel like how a lot of these executives, again, we're talking VP level and above, how they sort of view salespeople. I think I impressed them enough that we kept going because of my style. But you could tell a lot of them, and it's kind of funny, the lower down you go, the more people want to stay inside of a box and go through an RFP. They don't want to think big enough because they're focused on just their division. They're focused on their role. They're time strapped. The higher you go up, obviously, the less competition you face, as well as the bigger the thinking that happens at that level. But you can't get to that level, right, until you sort of really build that trust and collaborate with the people that are charged with the responsibility of reviewing your solution. So the way I started to look at this is, okay, I've got to be different in everything that I do. And I just started building a standard similar to the approach that I took with the SDRs and the BDRs of like, hey guys, let's not repurpose the same crap. That's just going to inundate their inboxes, get caught in spam, the press delete. And so I wanted to create in every level, what's a higher standard? How can I be different? And so I really started to think more like a design thinker. Because it naturally attuned to the way I was naturally selling anyways. I was never selling. We're solving for a buying problem, really, in complex selling and strategic deal making. I think that's really important. Like writing that thing down is like, if you're going to write one thing down, that's one. And there's going to be one other later as we get into the subsequent steps. So we don't have a selling problem. We are solving for a buying challenge. And what that means to me is our executives already have a pretty good idea, whether it's their internal analysts, research they're getting from G2, Forrester, Gartner, you name it, executives jumping ship, like they probably know your solution or have experienced it or have caught wind of it somewhere, or through peer exchanges, they knew who the top players are. So they have a hypothesis of what's good and what their company should be doing. And so I wanted to come in and start designing a better experience where it could be conducive to buying a transformation. So everything in person, like I was super crisp about like, what I looked like, how I talked, to events that we would deliver for these executives in a white glove type of service level. Like we would bring them in and talk with peers in like these amazing spaces. So it's a collaboration with your marketing department. It's not just doing the standard stuff. It's not, you know, the diamond standard is not sitting behind a booth at a conference. It's really starting to elevate and thinking through your email, your calls, your presentation, what's behind you in a virtual call, what software you're using, where you can present in a more interesting way. Because they need to start putting their fingerprints on the deal. And I noticed that by being a design thinker, when we could get to a stage where we're co-designing and we're collaborating, that's when these deals really started to happen at an accelerated pace, as well as of a really large deal. We're talking 7-8 figure types of deals when we're sort of working in this like consultative type of level. And I would always tell my executives, hey, I'll probably save you a $500,000 consulting fee where you don't need to go to Deloitte or Accenture if you allow us to come in and work with you and start designing this out. So it'd be really like challenging, but also really inviting to them, because I'm not operating off of a script. Like, we're co-creating, we're co-developing this. And when you get to that level, that's when they start writing, if they do have to go through an RFP, because there are some requests for proposal. There will be some companies who have to go through those types of things because it's a mandate from the company. But when you're elevated at that diamond standard, they're going to be coming to you to help write that RFP. They're going to be asking you questions like, well, what features should be a part of a fill in the blank transformation, fill in the blank with your industry. So that's the level that you need to aspire to. And you need to become an expert in whatever it is that you help a company buy. And a part of it too is becoming a design thinker, but also like thinking like a creator. One of the helpful exercises that I went to is starting to write more. I would write articles about our company, our industry, and I would do that very intentionally because I needed to become an expert in conversational AI. It's not something I had education on or experience other than through the onboarding and the education I gave myself. So to be better in every email and every phone call and every meeting, I would write about it. Like if the Wall Street Journal came to me and said, okay, talk to us about the conversational AI industry. How would a brand go fully conversational? So I thought that to myself and I was like, all right, well, I want to be known on LinkedIn about conversational AI. So I'll take that article and I'll start teasing that out as little chunks of posts, content posts that I could put out there every day. And so I just built a name for myself that way. And I'm still applying that same strategy now. Talking, and this is how I'm here, how Scott invited me onto this call, because I talk about now something different. I talk about how to win and deconstruct 7-figure deals and become a 7-figure earner. Not many people talking about that publicly. So this is a strategy that won't only help you in your current role, but help you in future endeavors as well.
Brandon, we've got a great question from Shane. If you don't mind, Shane, can you come off mute?
Yeah, Brandon, quick question for you on the diamond accounts. Those 5 criteria that you used to create the diamond, were those criteria that you chose because you feel comfortable selling that way, or was that your company's ICP that was given to you?
That was purely me. This is purely like what motivated me. I wanted something to get me really excited to get up at 5 a.m, get up to go hop on a plane somewhere across the country at 4:45 in the morning. I needed something that meant something to me. Obviously, I didn't go so far outside of our ISP that it was like, all right, go talk to the military. We had no experience. We had no government contract. I wouldn't do that, right? But the 5 criteria were mostly for me, not necessarily my company's information.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Any other thoughts, questions? Or should we go to step 5?
I think move on to step 5 for now.
Cool. All right. So as you can see, it's starting to build into, all right, once you've elevated yourself to a really high standard, you've gotten trust with the end users at the director level, they're getting excited. You're really starting to align with executives and the leaders, and they're like starting to put the pieces together of like, whoa, these moonshots that we've been thinking of, we can actually start to achieve some of those things realistically with this guy or this team or this company. So I always went into every engagement with this concept of thinking of a transformation. How can I not just sell a transaction, one little piece that serves a very specific use case, but how could I, again, going back to the previous step, as a design thinker, go to what I know either through the research that I did on that company and the previous meetings with those executives. How can we start to fulfill those moonshots and the ideal state across the board? So I would work backwards from that, and I would think to myself, well, again, I'll use the Delta Airlines example. I was on their plane. I knew what it was like to be their customer. I knew what it was like to go to the website, what it was like to call their people. I knew what it was like in their lounges. I knew their terminology. So I could work backwards and say, well, here's how every part of that experience, from booking to traveling to getting stuck to post-travel, how our solution could fit in and make life better for their customers, and in turn make them the #1 most loved airline in the world, which was their objective. So I could zoom in, or excuse me, let's just say I could zoom out and show that holistic experience, what the transformation is like. But then when it came to accelerating the deal, I could very clearly, and again, this wasn't me, and this will get into the next step, pull in our folks from services, pull in our transformation team to go in and say, okay, well, that's the transformation over 3 to 5 years. Now we need to focus on what's step 1, and then what's step 2 from there. So there was a very logical roadmap of how we could get them to that end state in 3 to 5 years, but start in the next 90 days with the most high impact use case to get started with. And again, that took collaboration with their team. That took whiteboard sessions, us writing on the board. It took handing the pen over to them writing on the board, and we would sort of stress test each other's ideas. We had data from our side of what a brand needed to do to operationalize this transformation, but they have unique value in knowing their systems and so forth, and how they operate as a company. They needed to share that. It became, again, us designing a fix, and that's solving a buying challenge, not selling or pitching or presenting to them something that is very one-sided. It was a very collaborative effort. So that's what I talk about in the book, and I get very specific on how you build that transformation mindset, how you can accelerate deals in very specific ways, whether that's using partners who are already inside the organization, like a Deloitte or Accenture or IBM, you name it. Not the biggest fan of that, because I always found that I could go faster directly. But sometimes you need to do that if they already have a contract in place, and there's mutual alignment. The other way is focusing on outcomes. Get a company to not buy something that is a budget and expense, but actually buy outcomes, not the software. And so we could do something like managed services, like just outsource everything to us. That could be talent, that could be designing, that could be the software. You guys don't have to worry about implementing the software and the cost and the time that it takes for that. Just buy outcomes from us, increase revenue, decrease cost. That's another really powerful exercise that you can go if your company, back to step one, the right environment, the right size company can facilitate something like that. It's a great way to get to a transformation deal, not just a small little transaction. Questions, thoughts on selling the transformation?
What happens if they don't believe in the transformation? You're selling the transformation and they're like slightly apathetic or don't see it as kind of revolutionary or groundbreaking as you do.
Then I did something wrong along the way. I either didn't design a good enough experience. Yeah,
Totally agree.
Mhm.
Hold on. So totally agree. Sorry, this is a Zoom like lag. Agree.
Yeah.
We didn't do something earlier in the process, 100%. How does somebody in that moment rectify that somehow or try to salvage it, maybe is a better word? Is there anything you can do? And I don't mean like some cheesy one-liner. Like, what do you do if you've kind of fucked it up and you recognize that and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
How do I?
Yeah. If I fucked it up, if I had a misstep along the way, then it may not be me that corrects it. What I might need to do is, and this is honestly how we won United Airlines. It's actually a great thing that you really reminded me. I wasn't delivering the same type of experience. My manager saw this. He was like, whoa, you are totally different with Delta than you are with United Airlines. Well, natural, right? I was spending so much time. I actually had brand affinity with Delta Airlines. I was proud to be a Diamond Medallion member. I loved their airline. I love their brand. I love their people. Trying to replicate that, I could tell, the VP we were working with there, Brian, he was like apprehensive to us on the sales team. I built a good enough rapport that I had his trust, but he was like, I need to know what it's going to be like to be your customer, Brandon. Like you have delivered, like these dinners are amazing. These events are amazing. Everything you're talking about, we can get behind, but I need to know what it's like to be your customer, right? Not just sold the happy path. When it's going to get really ugly and the platform's down and you know what it's like, I need to know what that experience is going to be like. So the best thing that I could do at that point was just remove myself from the situation. Again, go behind the scenes, whether that's being like the quarterback or the orchestrator of the symphony. I need to let somebody have the solo efforts and put a spotlight on them. So our head of transformation, Mel, like she and Brian clicked, and they were like kindred spirits because she came from a background where she was actually our customer before we poached her and hired her. And that allowed him to have the trust of like, okay, I might not be able to trust the sales guy or the sales team, but I can trust Mel because she's going to have my back because it's her skin on the line, right? When we actually go live and I need to be happy on a weekly, daily basis, she's the one I can go to. So I needed to give them a glimpse of take a back role and a backseat role and allow Mel to come to the forefront and play her solo cello back to the orchestrator analogy. So that's how I did it. Like, you're not doing anything cheesy. You're not trying to do a bait and switch. It's just like, you have to realize, hey, this person just doesn't trust me, rightfully so, right? I'm selling a vision. They need the experience of being a customer.
It's a good call out, because I'm sure a lot of people here, especially people who are in sales leadership, can attest to, your team is always coming to you with like, what do I do? What's the one thing I say? With this like magic one-liner, and it just doesn't work that way. So appreciate that explanation.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet, that's for sure. All right, let's jump into step 6. So perfect segue. We actually just kind of covered it. Is if you're going to write something else down, this would be another line that I would write down. So I like to be a generalist with my skill sets, but a specialist with my outcomes. So as we saw in the previous step, my outcome is to sell a transformation. My specialty is I am not the best presenter. I am not the best whiteboarder. I am not the best closer. I am not the best negotiator with procurement. So I need to pull in people who are, and I am perfectly okay with that, because I know when I can get people internally just as excited as I can, hopefully, with external stakeholders, that's when true magic starts to happen. And so it's the internal sell that's just as important as the external one, like making sure I'm not an asshole and I'm not burning bridges and expecting our InfoSec team to turn around an IT audit in 48 hours, like giving them time, I always try to think to myself, how do I make somebody else's job easy? And if I am going to play quarterback, know when to run the ball, know when to hand the ball off, know when to pass, and the right times to do each of those. So that's really what I think about in my role as a strategic seller. I'm doing that. I'm just allowing people to shine. There have been times where I say nothing on a meeting and I let, my kick-ass solutions consultants like do her thing. And I did my job, which was to make her job easy. I gave her all the information she needed. I gave her all the assets. I gave her everything that she needed to do to deliver her best. And that's only going to happen through knowing that person, knowing what they care about, knowing what makes them tick, good collaboration. Same thing when it comes down to procurement. And I'm going to rely on our legal team to push back and what those levers are. I need to know what Lauren cares about. And you know what? When we win, I need to know what she likes in life, and I'm going to send her a gift. So systemizing some of those things, the recognition, the rewards, that's going to really help beef up your commission checks, because I've seen so many sellers who take the mentality of I am high and mighty and everybody's at my disposal and you need to do things when I dictate them. That's going to keep you limited to, 6 figures a year. If you want to elevate to selling and earning 7 figures, you need to learn the internal sell is just as important as the external sell.
Brandon, question for you.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this new notion of like co-selling and like partner selling and all of that? How does that align to that last step that you just kind of walked through? So, example, Nick is here. He works at one company. I work at another. We're both trying to crack into the same account, or I've cracked into one and I help him get in, and we kind of scratch each other's back type of thing. Is that totally dissimilar from what you just talked about, or is it kind
not
of
at all
same vein? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we're in a new age where I think we can get more done through collaboration than competition. And I've certainly learned that really well by becoming my own entrepreneur, becoming a solopreneur, becoming a full-time creator. Like, I can't look at you, Scott, or Justin Welsh, or Jamal Reimer, or Ian Cognac, and think of them as competitors. I need to interact with them as collaborators. We have enough of market share, potential market share, to earn more than our fair share and then some, and still be really happy and satisfied. So I think we are moving into a new world, again, a little easier in a more entrepreneurial endeavor, but I think this is going to happen more and more in sales. And those who are innovative thinkers and are thinking, hey, it's not a zero-sum game. How can you get something out of this? How can I get something out of this? Not in a sleazy way, but in a collaborative way that you both level each other up. That's a win-win. And there are definitely ways, like I saw lots of opportunities where I could help what would normally have been a competitor, let's say in the loyalty space, when I was selling something that sort of touched loyalty, but in a different way. When we worked together and we could go co-present a plan, and maybe they already had an agreement and I was working on getting an agreement in that organization. Well, guess what? Because they have an agreement and I have a good rapport with that competing company, well, that helps me to accelerate my deal because I'm just earning that much more trust, because here's somebody that already has 2 or 3 years down the path of working with that company, has the MSA in place. And here they are inviting sort of a competitor to come in. And if I don't burn that trust and we work together, what's the harm in that? We only help level each other up. So I think we need to think more collaboration and less competition. It's not a zero-sum game.
I like that. We got a question from Evan. Evan, can you take yourself off mute?
Yeah, thanks. Really enjoying this, Brandon. My question is kind of in looking at this from a systemic perspective, where if you go through each of the steps in the process, obviously the system works, right? Theoretically, so moving from the wrong environment to moving to the right environment strikes me as a particularly challenging step to accomplish in the first place. But even when accomplishing it, there's no guarantee that your contacts will turn into champions for the new solution. So my question is, why should they care? What kind of steps in that process are you using in terms of generating interest? I'm not a big fan of sending people like slide decks and shit like that, but if you're relying exclusively on your relationship with that person, it can be burning credibility for them to recommend you for every solution you end up working for, right? Any thoughts?
Yeah. So just so I make sure I understand, are you talking about leaving one company and going to another company?
I've hired enterprise sales executives into my organization in no small part because of the Rolodex they claim to have in the interview process, and very often it doesn't work out because either they exaggerated or they didn't have the kind of connection that they thought they did, or the solution that we have is not in the same domain of expertise that they had at a previous organization, and therefore it makes it almost a wasted endeavor. I guess my question was from that context.
Yeah. Okay. That's super helpful. Thanks for clarifying, Evan. So I think in that context, I think it's really important we start to help sellers. We know that, they're going to exaggerate, right? During the interview process, they're going to, resumes always like 10, 20% better than reality. And especially if people aren't in the habit of sharing their W-2s, like there's going to be a little bit of falsification in there. So I think we just have to, like, one, just recognize that, and two, recognize, hey, this may not be an environment where you can run, or more specifically sprint out of the gates in the first 30, 60, 90 days. So why don't we take our time, slow down in order to speed up? Like, I think that's just a good operating principle. And, look at the person as a human versus an object, and look at them as, hey, all right, we recognize that we need to enable you to have the confidence, build your foundation. And I think the best way to sort of think about it is, they're almost like a franchisee, and you're the franchisor, and they need to, like, respect your brand. They need to respect your process. They need to respect your operations, but they also need some freedom. They need some support. They need to come in and know that they can run their business the way they know they can run their business, but have the support when needed. So I think if we, like, think of the relationship like that, allow them to be an entrepreneur. You hired them for a reason, so give them the freedom and autonomy where they need it, and then give them the support where they need it. And sometimes it just takes, hey, like, what's important to you? Like, what do you need? If we can't utilize your Rolodex immediately, like, what are ways that we can, what are your ideas for breaking into accounts or finding your diamond accounts? How can I support you? And then, like, get humanistic, get real on real targets, and not put them under the pressure of, like, oh, I got to close something in the first 90 days, 120 days, or I'm out of here. But think more long-term and realistic, like a franchise operator would. If they were to buy into a Domino's or a Pizza Hut, they need to, like, learn the way of Domino's, and then have a year to build their business so that they can go and launch a second Domino's and a third and a fourth. So a little more humanistic thinking and a little more long-term thinking, I think, can go a long way from our leaders.
Yeah, I really appreciate the thinking of it as a franchisee franchisor relationship. That's definitely a new way of framing it that I enjoy. So yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, cool. All right, so should we jump into the last step?
Yes, sir.
Let's do it. All right, step 7. So this is the most important step that I found to keep me in the 7-figure earners club, because if I didn't, I would just be back into the motions of constantly hustling and grinding and working around the clock, burning out to stay successful, because we know it can get really chaotic in the modern knowledge era, and especially the fast-paced movements of SaaS sales. So developing a personal operating system, this is the stuff that I geek out on. This is what I love. I like to think of this in frameworks. And I preface this in the ebook, like, I'm not here to hand over a playbook and expect you to follow. You're too smart to follow directions and follow orders. The idea is you need to build a compass instead of following directions on a map. That's going to be more important to you to be able to make decisions and solve problems versus follow orders. So a couple of frameworks that I developed that were super helpful for me of maintaining this consistency is, the first one is called DFC, and it stands for discipline, flexibility, and curiosity. And it's just a good way to operate with anything with a start, middle, and end. So this could be as simple as a single workday. It could be a meeting. It could be a whole sales engagement. And the idea is, I want to start with a mindset of discipline. And that means I want to operate almost like a world-class athlete would warm themselves up to get ready for intense training or competition. I want to do the same thing. So if it's a work day, I want to go through a very specific warm-up routine that I know gets me ready to do my hardest task, my most important task. And generally, that most important task is a revenue generating task. And I want to do that before I even check my email or I do my first meeting. So I know how to warm myself up by meditating or writing in a journal. It's not for me to say what that is for you. You need to develop that for yourself. But I can tell you, if you're consistent with it, that's going to be the key. Same thing for like a meeting, right? I want to do proper research on who's going to be in this meeting. What do they care about? What are some important insights that I can share that will keep the conversation going? You need to be disciplined to do that upfront work. Then in the middle, whether it's a work day or inside a meeting, I need to be more flexible, kind of like a creative artist. And I always think of either an improv comedian or maybe even like a freestyle hip hop artist, where you can throw them an idea and they can spit these rhymes, or an improv comedian can take an idea from the crowd and do a whole bit on it, or get a heckler and like they make everybody laugh and flip on a dime. So that's like a mindset of being flexible and able to adapt in the moment. And that's also really important because you can't control what happens in the middle of the day. Maybe an angry customer, because the platform has come down, sends you an email and it completely changes the course of your day. You need to be flexible to adapt to that. Same thing in a meeting. You may not be anticipating a certain objection, and you need to be ready and flexible to adapt. And so the best way to do that is to be mindful and in the moment. And then at the end of something, at the end of the workday, or at the end of that deal, the end of that meeting, I want to look back with curiosity, sort of like a scientist would look back on an experiment and not look back with emotion. How often does that happen? Why did he or she say that? Damn it. Like, we start pointing the fingers. Instead, we just look at whatever somebody said or however somebody reacted, look at it like a data point on a chart. And if you get in the mindset of being like a scientist, you can just ask yourself two basic questions. What went well? And then how do I repeat that in my system going forward? And what didn't go well? How do I improve that in my system going forward? So that's like a really simple framework that just helps me to think, all right, here's how I operate dependent on what stage it is of anything. That leads into another framework called PrEP. And that stands for, not that the sales world needs a bunch of acronyms, but whatever.
Yeah, there's not enough.
Yeah, exactly. But hopefully like these resonate. So PrEP stands for plan, rest, effort, and perform. Again, this is how I operate, not necessarily like my sales style, but being curious at the end of the workday, that allows me to plan out tomorrow. So I do a little bit of just like I have a morning routine, I have an end of day routine, because again, I can control how I start my day, how I end my day. And I'm consistent with those things. I hold myself accountable because I almost gamify that experience. So after this call, I'm going to end my day. I'm going to do a warm down routine, just like you wouldn't walk out of the gym after doing intense exercise or training. You need to sort of warm down. You need to stretch a little bit to make sure your muscles don't cramp up later. So the same thing I do, I review with curiosity how my day went. And then I plan out tomorrow. I time block my calendar so nothing slips through the cracks and gets on my calendar without me intentionally knowing about it. I know what my most important task is. I have a trusted system where I dump all of my tasks in Todoist, and that integrates with something that I operate in most of the day called Sunsama, Sunsama. It integrates with my Gmail, my Google Calendar, integrates with Todoist, a bunch of other apps, and it's sort of my headquarters of where I'm operating each day. So by doing all of that, doing that brain dump, cleaning out my inboxes, that allows me to rest for the evening. I can truly be present with my wife. We can relax. I can recover. I don't have to be tethered to my phone. I'm not thinking about something that I missed because I already got it out of my head. And I can actually sleep at night. I can sleep well, get good sound sleep. I'm a big proponent for prioritizing your sleep as a strong foundation for a good day, because if you have energy, right, you can do more. And so that leads to effort. I can put 100% effort the next day into my most important task. And again, my operating principle is I complete my most important task. I have the discipline of not looking at social media, not looking at my inbox, not looking at Slack, and keeping my meetings after 10 a.m. so I can do my warm-up routine, which I call my daily start routine, and my most important task. And my most important task is some sort of strategic endeavor that pays me dollar bills, lots of dollar bills in the future. So I'm always focusing on that. You do that day in, day out, success is going to come. You will get into the 7-figure earners club. You will put yourself in a position to be able to retire from the corporate world at a young age and start, managing your time and energy and attention the way you want to. And then the last P is performance. If I am going to obsess about anything, I look back on my performance, again, asking those two basic questions. What went well? I'm going to double down on that. What didn't go well? How can I improve that? And it becomes this flywheel that just keeps me moving forward and up. So that's it. I mean, I have a bunch of cool tools that helps me to stay on track, gives me that awareness. Like I said, I've gamified the process a little bit. So I actually look forward to doing these routines. And it's once now I have the system in place, I know I can't fall below the level of that system. And my system just keeps getting better. Even if it's just 1%, a la James Clear of Atomic Habits, 1% better each day. At the end of the year, I can be 37% better than if I were to just operate the old way, which is completely reactive. Opening up my email is the first thing I do. I play catch up on the weekends, and before I know it, the day is gone. My energy zapped. Now I'm just a bit more intentional and deliberate about knowing what I want to do because I know why I want to do them. That's my system.
I love this phrase so much. Retire. ... That's my part from the corporate world.
Yeah.
Not retiring.
Right.
It's retiring from the corporate world, which is such a killer distinction. You said that earlier today before everybody joined, and I was like, wait, I'm not retired.
Yeah.
And then kind of clarified it, and it was like, oh, that's really good. So we're coming up to the end of things here. Does anybody have any last questions for Brandon? We appreciate you, Brandon, and your time. There's a lot of comments that I've been getting on the side that this has been super valuable. I hope you get a bunch of book purchases and new connections on LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff. Sanjay has a question, and KD mentioned this to me when he was over a little bit ago. KD said, has Brandon busted out his DJ equipment yet? And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? KD says you're a DJ, and Sanjay wants to know what's your DJ name.
Yeah, so Sanjay, my current DJ name is, and I'm actually going to get back to making some mixes because I have my own community and they've been asking me for mixes. My current DJ name is DJ Brand Name, all one word. You can find me on Mixcloud. Just search DJ brand name, all one word. And I have some old mixes. I need to get back on the turntables.
I'm not gonna lie. I feel like we got gypped a little bit. Like you should have entered Tuesday with one of your mixes going, or like an outro kind of situation.
We'll do that next time.
Next time, Brandon. Yeah. Okay. Anything you want to leave us with? Not sure there's any more questions left. Any party? Here we go. Jeff needs a refresher. What were the 5 characteristics for your diamond accounts?
Yeah. So move fast. Knowledge that I had in an industry could be large once we got engaged. So for me, I define that as a $2 million deal or larger. Trying to think, cool, like a cool brand, like something we use in our everyday lives and impactful. And to be honest with you, I think I'm blanking on the 5th one. I'll have to share it with you, Scott.
We can do it. And you know
it's
what?
Actually in the ebook, I actually put my specific examples in the ebook.
And you know what? You know what people can do too? They can just watch the replay, Brandon.
Yeah.
Where you probably mentioned it. Sanjay, you can go back and watch the replay.
Yeah.
That's what we'll do.
So here's my gift to everybody. You can scan this or go to 7stepsto7figures.io. I know I'm being really original here. If you insert the coupon code Tequila7, you will get the same discount that I offered to my community when I launched this 3 weeks ago, which is 56% off. And you can grab it for $34 for a limited time.
There we go. Thank you so much, Brandon. Thank you all for joining us. Check out Brandon's book and follow him on LinkedIn. And we'll see you next time on Tequila Tuesday. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for having me.